Nice. Yeah, there's some rain pouring here. It is the start of another rainy season, alhamdulillah.
I
Uh,
can't hear you.
can you hear me? Let me check my sound. Just a moment. Just a moment. Sorry for the interruption. Just, I think my speaker is okay. My mic also. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome all to this radio program. With me is Brother Abdul Karim, Brother Ayman, and noble speaker Sheikh Abu Bilaal Yakuub. We are going to start off with a dua from my brother from Tanzania, Brother Abdul Karim Ramadan. Welcome.
اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا. اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك، ويا مصرف القلوب صرف قلوبنا على طاعتك برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. I think your mic is muted, brother. Brother Man.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for the dua, Brother Abdul Karim Ramadan from Tanzania. I take this opportunity to welcome my second co-host, that is Brother Ayman Chilwan, also from Tanzania, to introduce Sheikh Abu Bilaal Yakuub to our listeners and to our guests who are also in the room. Please, Brother Ayman, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a great honor to have Ustaz Sidi Abu Bilaal with us. He is a great writer and also a dear teacher to me. He is teaching me. So alhamdulillah, he is a very profound teacher, and his philosophical reasoning and thinking has also helped me a lot, alhamdulillah, over the years. Inshallah, I hope we can have this frequently and benefit from him more, inshallah. I welcome you, Ustaz.
I mean, Jazakallah khairan.
Yes, Brother Man, over to you.
Brother Ayman, you can carry on. I think I'm not ready.
All right. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Today's topic, inshallah, it is children's upbringing in Akhiri Zamaan. And unfortunately, I don't have much to speak on it as I still have no children. So inshallah, we can start with those who have children. Inshallah, maybe Brother Abdul Karim, Ustad Abdul Karim, and Ustad Sidi Abu Bilaal can take over and help us understand and help us learn on these challenging times, as we know that these definitely are challenging times, especially for our kids. And the way I see it, they are the warriors that are coming. So what should the mentality be for us parents? How should we help our children grow and become the true scholars of Islam? that they are supposed to become, inshallah. I welcome Brother Abdul Karim, inshallah, to start.
Sorry for the interruption, Brother Ayman. And Brother Abdul Karim, I was moving to a place with a good connection. I was proposing that we give our learned scholar, Sheikh Bilaal, time to talk about the topic, and then maybe we shall give the listeners and those who are joining us in the room time now to ask questions or to share with us their challenges. Is it okay? My co-host, my two co-hosts.
Naam, inshallah.
It's good to see what Brother Bilaal scholar what he has presented. I think we should leave Abu Bilaal to present what he has presented today.
You are barely audible, Brother Abdul Karim. I can't hear you.
I was suggesting the same, that we should leave for Abu Bilaal to present what he has prepared for today's lecture.
Okay, thank you. Without further ado, I take this opportunity to welcome our guest, Sheikh Abu Bilaal Yakuub. Welcome, please.
Jazakallah khairan. Bismillah. Walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I did not actually prepare for a lecture. I thought this was going to be questions and answers mostly. So, and I probably should have warned you that a lecture with me is minimum 2 hours plus question and answer. So I'll try my best in the short interim that we have. And I think really the subject itself cannot be covered in any short period of time. Because we are speaking about human beings that who have not yet reached their level of maturity to decide even for themselves, and they are in a world which is surrounded or engulfed with certain ideologies and certain mechanisms that are pretty much beyond the control of our contemporary age, meaning we as parents cannot really control the environs when it comes to our children, and there is no hope in the near foreseeable future of it getting any better. It will continue to get worse until it reaches its threshold, by which time the damages that are done on our children and ourselves is pretty much irreversible. The concept of raising children in Islam is centered around two particular elements, which is ta'aleem and tarbiyah. And these two have to go hand in hand. And collectively, this concept in the Western tradition from the English language is called education, which itself, the word education is something that has lost its meaning. What it used to mean before, education from the Latin word educare meant upbringing or raising up. It didn't really mean teaching, it meant more of tarbiyah than the ta'aleem. And what's being applied in education now is more of the ta'aleem and less of the tarbiyah, which is really an injustice to the children, where it's basically just a flooding of information into children. and children are basically just being exposed to information, compounded upon information, which their minds psychologically have not developed to be able to understand or analyze or interpret that information and convert it into something that is valuable for them. So many children come out or grow up being smart and being cunning and being being able to do a lot of things that are calculative, quantitatively based. They're able to do mathematics and all these other subjects, but they do not have what's embedded into them with that information, which is the morals and the ethics and the values and the virtues. So in Islam, these two have to go hand in hand, which is the ta'aleem, where the child is taught based on their level, and the teaching is less compared to the upbringing and the nurturing, which is the more valuable. But unfortunately, even in the Muslim world, in Muslim families, that is not the case, because the system that has been now developed and applied into the world, where the objective of raising people up from childhood to maturity is to transition them into a sort of a workforce mentality, where they have particular roles to fulfill, which are called jobs now. So the nurturing that is taking place from the school level is to discipline the child in the same way that you would discipline somebody who is in the military, as to what equipment they should use and what station they should occupy and how they should follow the orders and instructions that will be coming to them in the development of not themselves, but the greater machine that is working for the others. So the child is not really gaining anything that is beneficial to it, he or she, but is beneficial to something that is of an external component that is going to benefit others who are running the great machine that they have put in place, that system. So from the time that the child is woken up in the morning, they are not taught the etiquette of being grateful for having woken from sleep, or taught to think of he who created them. They are put straight into the mode of get this done and get this done and get that done, brush your teeth, eat your breakfast, change your clothes, uniform, and then go to school. And then from 7 or 8 in the morning up until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, even 5, that's essentially a 9-to-5 job for the child, because that's what they're doing. It's an office setup. They're sitting behind the desk, and then there is this figure in the front who instructs them and tells them, this is what you're supposed to do now, and after this you do this, and after this you do that. And if the child wants to go to the washroom, he has to ask permission. And if he wants to have something to eat, he has to ask permission. And if he wants to go home, he has to ask permission. And this is the same mentality that is eventually applied when the individual grows up and goes to the workforce. That's essentially what we all end up doing in employment. When you want to take a break, you have to tell the boss. When you want to have something to eat, you have to tell the boss, and it's 9 to 5 throughout your life. That's essentially the training that's taking place. Now, Muslims have unfortunately adapted that into thinking that this is how the world functions. This is the normal thing, so we have to work with it. Nobody thinks that we have to build our own, that we have a tradition which we have abandoned completely. Because according to the mindset of most Muslims, is that if the child does not go through this process, the child will not be successful, ergo the child will not get a job, he is not going to, and so on and so forth, the future will be destroyed. So to secure the child's future, I need to make sure my child goes through this system. Only to realize later on down the line that the child is now completely void and is completely empty in terms of the spiritual essence of the human being. And so far as the body is concerned, the child is there in front of you, healthy, has got children himself, and they tend to now either replicate what their parents did to them, or they will completely rebel against what their parents did. I don't want to raise my child the way my parents did. So my parents did not give me, sweets or chocolate and stuff. I'm going to give my child this. My parents did not let me have such and such a thing that I wanted. I'm going to give my child that. So they end up going into the complete extreme side of it. And the beauty of Islam in this case, in all aspects, comparatively to all aspects, the Islam always plays a central role. Islam is the balance between all extremities. Whether you take Judaism and Christianity, Islam is in the center. Whether you take capitalism and socialism, Islam is in the center. Whether you take, depriving the child of all their wants and desires, or giving the child all their wants and desires, Islam plays a center role. The thing that's lacking is this centerpiece. It's the knowledge that the parents need to imbibe in themselves first, before they can go out and start imbibing it to their children. Because if you do not have the knowledge, then you cannot impart any knowledge to anyone else. And ultimately now, the child, the parent, the grandparent, every single human being has been sent into this world as a Khalifa unto himself and herself. Not for state political Khilafah, but this is now the spiritual Khalifa, governing the self. And you cannot govern yourself if you don't know how to govern yourself. So the knowing is what is central to the human being's essence. Without knowledge, you cannot know who you are, what you should do, and what is your destiny. Where are you headed towards? Whether it is in this worldly aspect, or it is now more existential towards the Akhirah. So with children, it is really a matter of parents themselves building themselves intellectually and spiritually, and thereby enabling themselves to impart that intellectual aspect and spiritual aspect onto their children. Because if the parent has not governed themselves in terms of their own psychology, their own wants and desires, their own whims and reactions, their own intellectual abilities, then they cannot impart anything to the child. And a lot of parents fall into this void, particularly now when in the early stages, the children are controllable. And they also end up doing an injustice on the children because they are not able to understand how to discipline or how to regulate the children. But in the later stages now, when the child grows up as a teenager and realizes that I actually have power and control against this man who calls himself my father, or this woman who calls herself my mother, they cannot hit me anymore. They can't shut me in my room anymore. They can't do anything to me anymore. Then the child will rebel. Because to the child, they have seen their upbringing as an injustice to themselves, right? And when injustice becomes the law, then rebellion will naturally become a duty. So the child at the teenage stage will definitely turn back against the parents. And if that is also not brought in within regulation, then ultimately the child will abandon the parents. And now coming back to the Islamic aspect of it, all the knowledge is there in our tradition. As far as human psychology is concerned, as far as child psychology is concerned, and as far as the guidance is concerned, how you should relate with your children. Imam Ali said, لَعِبُهُمْ بِسَبْعٍ وَآدِبُهُمْ بِسَبْعٍ وَنَسِيَهُمْ بِسَبْعٍ. Play with them for 7 years, and then discipline them for 7 years, and then advise them for 7 years. And that's directly related to the psychology of the human being as they grow up from in these 3 stages of 1 to 7, and then 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. And at the age of 21 is when you are said to have reached your maturity as an adult. The first 7 years is because the child is in a state of fitra. They're still transitioning from the the realm of possibilities, right? So they have not developed an reason yet, an aqli yet, to be able to distinguish, because they don't understand causes to effect yet. They don't understand logic and rationality yet. They're still learning slowly, but they haven't grasped it yet. So for a child to lie is the same as speaking the truth. Both are possibilities as far as the child is concerned. So the child breaks something and you ask, who did this? And says, I don't know, it wasn't me. That statement is as much a truth as saying I did this, according to the child. Now that's difficult for us to understand because we've been entrenched in the rationality of the world, but the child is still naive in that sense. So in that regard also, disciplining has to be, it has to be balanced. The parent has to know how to discipline, because disciplining children in Islam does not mean punishment for crime. Discipline does not mean kiboko. It doesn't mean, kneel down or hold your whatever. It doesn't mean that. Discipline means the adab is the shaping and the molding and the structuring, in the same way that you train your muscles when going to the gym, or a soldier goes through his training. That's what it is. It's entrainment. It's to train the child, to show the child these are the boundaries. And it has to be a continual thing, because that's what training is. It's not done once and then it's taken for granted that it's okay, I told him and it's done. It is a continual thing. It has to be practiced on. The child will do it again. You have to train the child again. He'll do it again. You train the child again. You see, and that's the first 7 years. In those 7 years, all three faculties of their being, which is their aqali, their ghadabi, and their shahwani, are still developing. They're still getting imbibed into this world and how the world functions. In the next 7 years is when the ghadabi and the shahwani they develop faster than the aqali. So because the body is also going through changes when they hit puberty. So they have hormonal changes and imbalances taking place. They've got certain lusts and desires that now start manifesting. They're very angry, they're very moody, they're very reactive. So that's your shahwa and your ghadab, the lusts and desires, and then the reactions and the anger and the moods. These develop faster than the aqali. This 7 is when Imam Ali says, adibuhum bi-sab'in. In this section is when you want to discipline these two. You want to try as much as you can to help them regulate the shahwa and the ghadab. They have to develop. They are not to be suppressed. They have to develop because they will aid the human being later on in his life. But they need to be controlled, because if they go out of control completely, they will overwhelm the aqali. Rationality will not develop. That is what adab means. It's to train them. You get angry, calm down, take it easy, talk to me. What's bothering you? You see, you want this thing, why don't we work out how to get it, instead of just, I want it and I want it now. You see, there are different tactics that the parents have to employ, and the father and the mother have to play this dynamic role between the two, where one becomes good cop, the other one is bad cop. One is a bit strong and stern and strict, the other one takes a more cushiony, side and absorbing the hit. So this dynamic has to play out also. And then in the next 7 years is now when the aqali starts developing. Once these two are now under control, the aqali starts developing, and that's why he said, advise them now for the next 7 years, because now they're transitioning out into the world. You need to give them the tools with which they will be able to encounter and face the world as they go out there. So in the Islamic tradition, the way the ta'aleem was done, it was done to complement the tarbiyah. So they didn't teach children mathematics and sciences before the age of 7. Before the age of 7, it was they focused more on rote memorization. So they would memorize the Quran, they would memorize, vocabulary, they would teach them words, and they would build their language, because language enables intellection. And then in the next set, where now the aql is also developing, is when they started giving them the tools to expand the sciences, which were in the traditional, in the classical sense, they were the trivium, logic, grammar and language, but then language, then came rhetoric afterwards, so that they would be able to analyze things on their own and study on their own, so that when they come into the next phase of the 7 years, they can then be exposed to the sciences like fiqh and hadith and tafsir and so on and so forth. By the time they reach their maturity and they're now ready to take on the world as adults, they are equipped with the knowledges and the sciences of the tradition, even if it is at the basic level, so that by that age, they are ready to get married and now have children of their own whom they can raise as they were raised. That I just shortened everything, is the algorithm or the process that our tradition holds in Islam. That is the formula or the alchemy of how to raise your children. Now, when it comes to our age and time in the eschatos of humanity, now gearing towards the end, understanding particularly the eschatology behind things plays an even more important role. Because what the parent might take for granted might actually be the thing that destroys the children. And take for granted meaning that they are oblivious or ignorant that such a thing, such a device, such a concept, such a cultural element is from the Jalic world that has got an agenda, has got a purpose to undo what you are doing as a parent. I've seen a lot of parents do this. They will give their children devices, whether it's the phone or it's a tablet. The child is crying, I want something, and then to just pacify the child, they will give them a thing and they'll just be watching their YouTube stuff on there. This is very dangerous for the child. I mean, leave alone the Islamic aspect of it, just speaking psychologically, because in that age now of 1 to 7, you are forcing information onto a child. It reduces the child's capability of absorption, of conversion, because the mind is purposed for one thing only, and that's to interpret symbols and signs and to convert information into knowledge. It has to do it by itself. If you force information on the mind, it will not do it. The brain, in this case, that the mind uses is a dumb muscle. Every part of your body is a dumb muscle. If you don't exert the effort, the muscle relaxes. It doesn't do the work anymore because something else is doing the work for it. So why should I bother? It's a dumb muscle, right? So when you're forcing information, because this is all information playing out on the screen, whether it's cartoons or it's this or it's that, or whatever it is, that information is force-fed onto a child. The child's imaginative faculty does not function. The child's estimative faculty does not function. The child's memory and recollective faculty refuses to function. The child's common faculty refuses to function. All these faculties are part of the intellect. They don't function because the information is just given to them. So why should the child make an effort to figure it out? Why should the child make an effort to read and draw out or abstract reality from words? And so this abstraction becomes diminished. So that now when they reach the second age, the second 7 years, they do not have the ability to understand themselves, because what they do and what encounters they go through, whether it's from their peers or their teachers or whatever, they do not know how to interpret that to their own benefit. And the same thing applies throughout the rest of their lives, because if the foundation is not built, then the rest of the structure will eventually crumble. I mean, that's just one example of the device. There's so many examples like these, like the movies that we expose them to, and these superheroes and all these things of, Iron Man and now, I mean, you've got all these Marvel movies that are coming up that are complete garbage. I know because I grew up, reading comic books. So there was a certain amount of abstraction or imaginative abstraction that I could do as a child. But now even that's been removed, and you've got now these movies that are just telling the child what's going on. They don't exert imagination anymore. And then the language that these characters use also is a completely deficient and depleted language. It is so stupid that it makes the child stupid. Because that's now, and you will notice this, those who have children, your children will speak like that. They will say stupid things like that, like, I was super hungry. Well, what does super hungry mean? Where does super come in? It's not even grammatically correct, right? So, you know, these things are now breaking the child's, and at the end of the day, every parent must understand that you are the parent, that is the child, but that child is a soul, albeit that soul has not yet reached the level of maturity and understanding that you have, is still a soul. In other words, that is nafsun zakiyan. It's a pure and innocent child. If that child falters, it is your fault. If that child diminishes, it is your fault, and you will be held accountable for it. And that's not to speak for different, difficult children who, parents are actually making the effort and struggling to help, raise their children. I'm speaking about those who are ignorant, those ignorant fools who do these kinds of things and give their children all these devices and these avenues that corrupt the child's essence. And ultimately, they go out of their control completely. I don't want to take up too much time on that. So I'm going to end with a poem by Khalil Gibran. Is a Lebanese poet. He wrote on children. He said, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they don't come from you. This means you're just a vessel that's bringing them into this world. And though they are with you, they don't actually belong to you. In other words, they belong to the Lord Almighty, and you are just somebody who has been appointed to care for them. So you may give them your love, but you cannot give them your thoughts. You can't tell them how to think, and you cannot tell them what they should do and whatnot. You can only give them your love and nurture them with your love. And if you see the word rahmah is often used in the Quran in association with ilm, and also in association with mawadda, with love. There's always a rahmah that comes with that. That's the nurturing. The rahmah is the nurturing. It is through mercy, and the mother's womb in Arabic, which is rahima, comes from the same root word as the word rahma also comes from the word rahima, because the mother's womb is a place of mercy for the child, right? So you may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the houses of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can't foresee what they are going to be and how they are going to be. You may strive to be like them, but do not seek to make them like you. You can strive to be like them, but don't try to make them like you, because life does not go backwards. It goes forwards. It does not tarry with yesterday. You are the bows, and this is very interesting. He says this, you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. You are just the bow. They are the arrow. He is the archer. He is the one who fires the bow. It's the archer who decides which way the arrow should go. It's not the bow that decides which way the arrow should go. So you are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. And the archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might. It's the archer who decides which way the bow should be facing and which way the arrow should go. That his arrows may go swift and far, let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. In other words, the bow should submit to the will of the archer. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, he also loves the bow that is stable. The archer loves the arrows that goes and hits the mark he intends, but he also loves the bow that is strong and stable and does as it was created to do. As a parent, you were created to raise your child. Surrender your will as the bow to the will of Allah, And the only way you can do that is to do what you are meant to do, what you were created to do, as to be as he created you to be. Jazakumullah khairan. That's I'm going to end with that.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Abu Bilaal Yakuub, for that presentation. It was very wonderful. With the poem, you remind me about my own childhood when I was wondering, a question came into my mind, and I was wondering if, for example, a parent dies at the age of 50, and then the child goes on to live up to 70 years. Who is older than the other? So this one clearly shows that the parent is just a vessel for the child to come into this world. My two co-hosts and also our Sheikh, I don't know if you have time after Maghrib, we can continue. We gather the questions, or if maybe you're committed somewhere, we can continue this program next week, because it is about a few minutes to Maghrib in the East African time. I will ask you to comment, please.
I've already prayed Maghrib. Maghrib was earlier for me. I can wait if you prefer for me to wait. I have about 45 minutes before Isha.
Okay, inshallah. We shall read out to you the questions, if anybody has a question, and then as we pray for Maghrib, in the next 15 minutes, we shall be back. Sheikh has gladly accepted to continue, alhamdulillah. So let me ask my brother Abdul Karim to react and to ask his question.
Thank you, Brother Abu Bilal, for your nice presentation. I call it. It was well elaborated about how to nurture our children, how to raise our children based on the Islamic perspective. And I think it's what you said. There are two aspects that we should concentrate about. What Islam, since the beginning, focused about the ta'aleem and tarbiyah. Tarbiyah means rabba yurabbi tarbiyatan, like caring. It is correct to care someone, to nurture someone. So, and how can we link with the world today, our contemporary world, that raising our children in connection to the relationship between a husband and a wife, a father and a mother. Their relationship, how does their relationship affect these two aspects in ta'aleem and tarbiyah? And as we can see that the world now is trying to split up the families. We no longer have the extended families anymore, the nuclear families. Like they're destroying the relationship between the father and the mother. That at the last, it will affect also the nurturing of the children. So I think we could get something from you about the relationship between the father and mother towards the nurturing of their children. And also we have that verse in Surah Al-Tahrim. It's Surah number 66, and in verse number 6, does this have any indication with what is normally talked about, the mark of the beast, the 666, when Allah says, "Ba'da billahi minash shaitanir rajim," or you who believe, or you who have faith, "Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara." It's a fil amri, that you have to protect yourselves, your souls, and your ahl, your people, against the hellfire. So the relationship between the breakup of families, relationship between father and mother towards the nurturing of the children. And it is that يفرقون بين المرء وزوجه. They split up between the husband and wife. Yes, brother, it's only that.
Thank you very much, Brother Abdul Karim, for your question. I beg all of you to allow me to end this meeting. It is Mangarib Dio. I think you can hear the Adhan behind me. Then we shall come and ask our questions as we continue the program. Dear listeners, let us meet after 15 minutes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.